Okay, we are live. Good evening. This is Attorney Vince Davis, and this is The Secret, How to Fight CPS and Win. I'm joined by my very well-known co-host, Mr. Darren Guay. Mr. Guay, how are you?
I'm good, Mr. Davis. Yourself?
And Miss Georgette Truan. How are you, Miss Truan? Okay, she must be muted.
Yeah, someone must have muted her mouth. Looks
Let
like.
me remove her from the show. Okay, and we have a very special guest tonight, Miss Madrid, Miss Virginia Madrid. Hello, Miss Madrid. How are you?
Hello. Hi, I'm good. How are you all doing?
We're great. Wonderful.
Thanks for having me on tonight.
Uh-oh. We lost the voices here.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear
me?
you, Virginia.
There we go. We're back. Mr. Davis has got us back.
Okay, I'm like, wait, did something happen? I'm like, wait a minute. Okay. Yes, it's good to be on tonight and stuff with you all. I'm in Arizona.
Ah, Arizona. What part? What part of Arizona are you in?
Glendale.
Okay. Now, is that near Phoenix?
The west part of Arizona.
Okay.
Yes.
So what's going on with the CPS in Arizona?
If you really want to know, DCS in Arizona is very corrupt. I can honestly say, I've been dealing with DCS for about 4 years. I have had my rights severed for 3 of my children, and I'm in a reunification for my youngest. And I've taken it to the Supreme Court now. I have written a petition for review, and, I'm still trying to do the most I can do to get my kids home. I've done everything. I've completely complied with them. I've done classes. But the thing is, I've had numerous caseworkers, like about 10 through this whole case, and they all want to see something different, a behavioral change or, this or that. And it's kind of hard to show somebody a behavioral change when they come in and out so much, and then they told me that I couldn't go to the church that I go to no more. And that because it only had a little bit of members, I have this all on record from the court that they severed my rights for my 3 children because they said that the dad was going to the church where I was baptized at. So they use that as a way to sever my rights, and I'm trying to fight against that. And I have all the records of it, and I'm just trying to do what I got to do. I've taken it to the Supreme Court now.
To the Supreme Court of Arizona or of California? I mean, of
Arizona.
States. Okay.
Right now, it's a Supreme Court of Arizona.
Okay. Do you have an attorney that's helping you?
I do right now. Well, with my case, I do, but with my petition for review, I did that on my own.
Oh, you did it on your own. Wow. I bet that was a big learning curve.
It took a while, and it took a while, and it's about 12 pages, and I just submitted it last week.
Well, good luck on that.
I'm just gonna. I know, sometimes they're hard to win, but I know that I have good reasons. I know that I love my children very much, and I know that it's not enough for them to say that I can never see my kids again. People make mistakes in the past, and this case has been going on for 4 years, and I've showed them everything, and they're just like, nope, it's not good enough. This ain't good enough. Now we want to see this, that, and they got on the stand at trial and started saying things that kind of helped me in my record, So I'm just going to take it from there to the Supreme Court and see what happens.
Do you mind maybe sharing a little bit about what your case is involved, like how you got involved with them or what took place or how this even became?
I was homeless 4 years ago. I was me and my husband. We were homeless for about 3 weeks. Things, but we weren't homeless. Like, we didn't have nowhere to live. Like, we've always had a roof over our head, but we didn't have a stable home. This happened for 3 weeks. So they removed my children because a family member called and said to remove the children, because that family member thought that they were going to get one of the kids, because they wanted one of the kids. And me and my husband kind of got in an argument. We did have an argument. I do admit there was an argument. And from that argument, they're saying domestic violence for these whole 4 years.
Right.
I feel like I've fixed my mistakes. I beat myself up every day for everything. I've done numerous classes. I've done a lot of self change within myself to the point where I'm like, what more do these people want? I've done a lot of digging inside myself to change myself. And if it's not good enough for them because a caseworker doesn't like me or the judge doesn't like me, because I speak up for myself, and they don't like that. They want someone that's gonna, just let you do whatever they want to your children. When my children are getting abused in the system, in DCS care, it's bothersome. My son, he's autistic. He was abused in the foster system. I have pictures, I have police reports. The GAL saw the videos and they never disclosed them to me, or I was the last one to be notified. And my kids were never abused with me, never hurt with me, but yet the state can take them and they could do whatever they want and they get away with it.
So when they took your kids, what was that? Was there like a long-term agreement or effect of that? Or did they just take your kids and say, get yourself better? Or did you have to sign a safety plan? Or what went on there when they removed the children from you?
I was never given a safety plan. And that's what they brought up at trial, that mom was never given a safety plan. But when they took my children, they said, get a place and get everything together. And within 6 months, you'll have your kids home. So I got up and I got a place within the month. And the 6 months comes around and they were like, no, you still can't have the kids home. And a year goes by, no, you still can't have the kids. 2 years, 3 years, until they severed my rights for 15 months out of ground care. That was their ground for severing my rights.
Oh, wow. So you had, how much time went on between the time that they severed your rights and then from the time that they took your children from you?
About 3 years, 3.5 years.
So in that time span, then they gave you all the hoops to jump through. And
they just severed them. And I did everything they asked. Everything they asked and more. I was more on top of it than the caseworker was.
What was some of the things that they asked of you? Because obviously you had a domestic violence thing that they said was.
I did domestic violence counseling for about 2.5 years with the same counselor that gave good notes and said I was more than ready to have my children home and I met all my goals. They never read the notes. They got on the stand and said they just didn't have, the caseworker said she just didn't have the time to read any of the notes that my counselor wrote. And, I did my part. They didn't do theirs. And me and my kids are suffering for it. I've made mistakes in the past, don't get me wrong, but I've done all I can do to prove. I didn't make enough mistakes to have my children ripped from me for the rest of our lives. No.
Right. Mr. Davis, what do you do as far as an attorney when these people, like, I know a lot of cases say this, like she's completed these courses and she's done these things and these counselors are saying, hey, they're all set. Like, I'm sure you run into this often. What is it? What do you do in those situations to defend against these things? Or what can you say to help, someone if this is what they're being said against?
Well, it's an interesting perspective because every case is different. Sometimes I get people tell me that, hey, Mr. Davis, I've done everything and the social worker is not recommending the child. And in actuality, they've done very little. Or I get the case where they say I've done everything and they've actually done everything and more. And the social worker is still not recommending to get the child. And then you have everything in between, the different degrees. What generally I can say is that you must have a trial. You must have a contest to contest the social worker's recommendation. And what happens so many times, I don't know if this happened to Virginia, but sometimes, your lawyer, for whatever reason, strategy or otherwise, doesn't give you that contest, doesn't give you that opportunity to have a trial, and they just, argue. They just argue. Well, if you are in an argument phase of a case, 9 times out of 10, you're going to lose, because argument in California, probably in most states, is not evidence. And if the judge is only looking at that report, now, if the report is contradictory to the law, or within the report itself, you might be able to win. But it's always good, to try to put on a witness, unless there's a reason why a witness shouldn't be put on. A lot of people think, and I don't know Virginia or her case. A lot of people are like, yeah, Mr. Davis, I want to testify. But if they testify, sometimes that does them more harm than good. So it's just different for every case.
Did you happen to have a witness testify on your behalf? Did you have anybody lined up for those things?
I had all that testified for me was my counselors, everyone I did parental classes with. They all testified for me. My parent aide, she recommended family reunification. They all testified. But the thing is, at the trial, we found out on record that DCS was mixing me up with a whole different person during this case. And they said, oh, yeah. And the caseworker's like, oh, yeah, we were mixing her up with another person in a whole different case 4 times during this whole case. And they admitted it at trial. And the trial judge is like, he admitted that too in the record. So I'm taking that to the Supreme Court, where they're mixing me up with someone else and I'm getting the blame for it. Because I was reading the report, it's like mom was doing this around the kids, mom, and they were calling me a whole different person's name, like they were thinking I was the other person. And they admitted that at trial, that they had mixed me up for all these years on record, but yet they still went to trial with false information. So I'm like, well, what if they wouldn't have had these false things? Would I be reunified with my kids? Why am I being blamed for this? Why are they getting away with it? Because these people couldn't get it together and get their facts straight of who's who and what's what. Me and my kids are suffering, and they were like, oh, we mistaken you for this person, or we thought this was you. And it caused me to do drug testing for 2 years because they mixed me up with a whole different person. And they said, oh, well, we didn't mean to, but yet who's to blame? Because that caseworker no longer works there. And now there's yet a new caseworker.
Did you pass those drug tests?
And that's all on record.
Right. Did you
I passed every drug test they threw at me. I passed anything they give me. I did drug testing for about 2 years.
What did your attorney say, Virginia, when you were testing clean for all this time?
They just said, keep doing what you got to do, and that's it. And they've always used that, saying she's sober, But the thing is, they were mixing me up with someone else.
I know.
And that's the thing where it hurt.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, why am I suffering the consequence of, of this? And I did everything, I did the drug testing twice a week randomly with no problem, because if that's what I got to do to get my kids home, that's what I'm going to do. But still, there was no results at the end. I still got severed.
So you're dealing with the court-appointed attorney, correct? You're dealing with the court-appointed attorney?
No, no.
You have a private attorney? Virginia?
Yes.
You have a private attorney?
Yes.
And your private attorney is a juvenile dependency attorney or just a family law attorney?
I believe, I want to say family law and juvenile.
So how did you ask him how many cases, juvenile cases he or she handled?
I haven't, I just, I didn't know what to do, because when I went to trial, I had a public defender. I've had a few attorneys in and out the case, but now I've had my attorney now for about, I want to say 8 months, 6 to 8 months with this attorney. And now, my rights were severed for my 3 kids.
You had a public pretender. You had a public pretender up until your trial. And then now that you've gone into appeals, you've gotten yourself a new lawyer.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Well, no, I have my rights were severed for my 3 kids, and my youngest child is in reunification. I have an attorney for my youngest child. And
Okay.
I had another attorney for the appeals, but that was a court appointed attorney. And I lost my appeal. So I did a pro se petition for review to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And I just went through all the record and I got what they used on the stand and I put it in there. Just like the facts and stuff.
Mr. Davis, I know that you don't necessarily promote the whole pro se ideals, but what would you give for advice for someone that's going to pro se to, I know you don't know the case, but for their appeals, like what is something that would be a standard, something that you would interject to if you were going to an appeal? Is there any advice that you can give for someone like herself that's doing that on their own?
Well, like you said, the first piece of advice is please don't try to do it. Because, unless you've been to law school, unless you've practicing attorney, doing an appeal the right way, it's low probability of success. Now, realize I said low probability because has anyone ever won a pro se appeal? Probably so. But it's one of those things that it's like 1 out of 1,000. And, if you're talking about your children, why take that risk? But I can't tell her how to do an appeal. First of all, I don't know what the issues are, right?
Right.
But I don't know what she knows and what she doesn't know.
No, but as far as like, I know that in appeals, the biggest thing is either the way that you write out briefs or the time frame. Like they're very strict on their time schedules. Is there any advice that you could give or any standards that about, like as far as those things go, like that are just set standard for every appeal? Like make sure you do it in 10 days or any of that stuff.
It's not standard because every state is different.
Oh, okay.
I'm licensed in California. She's trying to do something in Arizona.
I got you.
So I wouldn't know. She probably, Virginia sounds very sharp. She probably looked these things up online or on Google or something. But those are things that she would have to try to figure out herself or with the assistance of a lawyer,
Yes.
who, knows about appeals. Is that what you did, Virginia?
Yes, I had some help, a little bit of guidance from a lawyer, and I was down at the Supreme Court a few times. I did my motion for an extension of 30 days, and then that was up. So I just turned in my appeal last week. My petition for review actually last week, sorry.
Okay.
And I just wrote the facts of the case, the reasons why, I just kind of pinpointed from the facts and I just put what page they can find of the record of the facts. I just wanted to stick to everything that was facts so that I can kind of back it up on the record. But, I hear a lot of times, it's people never win. They get thousands of these. I've looked this stuff up. These courts, they get thousands of these coming in. But I'm not going to give up. I'm trying every way and every point I can try to do. I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where are you at with the reunification process in your youngest child?
I have court coming up, and they said that my attorney said that everything's looking good, and they're going to start pushing for longer visits and try to get for overnights.
Oh, good. So that one seems to be like it's moving in a progressive. It's moving in a progressive way.
Yes.
Oh, that's excellent. That's good.
Yes. But it just doesn't make sense how they sever my rights just recently, and then I will never understand that.
Why is the grouping of the children different? Is it just because the youngest one is lagged on, has been slowed behind, or because all the children were taken at one time, or except for, is that correct?
He wasn't born at the time.
Yet. Okay.
Are your other kids at least with relatives?
Yes.
Okay. Do you get along with those relatives?
I would like to. I would like to. It's not I don't like them. I love them. You know what I mean? They're taking care of my kids, but it just they don't want any contact or anything. And I'm just like, it's not right, No.
How old are the kids?
My son's going to be 7. My other son's 5, and my daughter's going to be 4, and my baby boy is 20 months old.
So the three oldest children, they know who you are, huh?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
hard.
It's been very hard, you know. Yes.
Yeah,
And, you know, there's things that I think of. I'm like, do my children think I don't want them? Do they think I just neglected them? Do they think, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want them to feel any type of way. You know, I don't know what's going on. You know, DCS is like, okay, well, your mom, I don't know what people tell them, you know what I mean? Like what's going on or whatnot. But, you know, there has been things that DCS has done and they've never brought up at court. Like my son was abused and there's videos of it and they won't disclose it to me. The GAL saw them and they've never mentioned it to me of showing me the video. I keep asking them for it and now they sever my rights and now they're like, well, now you don't have any rights to it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And to me, I feel like they were just making time go more and more so they could sever my rights on 15 months out of care.
Of course.
Because that's the grounds that
that's what they'll do. They'll take things. For instance, in my case, they made it to the 6 months that I hadn't seen my daughter by just moving things along. And if you're not paying attention to these steps that they're doing and your attorney's not, you know, appealing decisions and everything, they will walk right through you and make their time limits meet the needs that they need to meet to get their, you know, to get this under their belts. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to follow those guidelines so that they can get their funding. So you need to always, like, you know, I wish to God's name himself that when my things happened first, that I would have gotten a hold of Mr. Davis. I mean, I really do, because there's so many things. I have a case similar where it was just it was a joke, really. You know, you didn't even think it was real, but it becomes real very quickly. You know, you figured, okay, we'll get my apartment, we'll get the job, we're good to go. And then as the longer they entrench you, the more they they start telling your family this, or they telling them this, and because you don't even know what they've told your family members that have the kids. Were you guys of friendship before this happened?
We weren't on bad grounds. You know, it's kind of like the placement that they have now is kind of like fighting for the kids from me. You know what I mean? So I think that's what makes it a lot rougher. Is they're like they want to adopt, and you know it's making it a lot harder for me to get my kids home. And DCS is like, oh well, forget about mom. You know, who cares what she feels or thinks? If we will have this person here that wants to adopt, and they just want to get the ball rolling. You know what I mean? Even at the CFTs, they make me feel like nothing, like, oh, you're just the mom. And, you know, they're all having conversation with the placement about things. And then I don't even know the other person, you know what I mean? Like the therapist for the kids. It's just, they make me feel like I'm at a place when I'm the mom.
Right.
You know, and they don't have an ounce of love for my children.
Right. Mr. Davis, what do you say about those things when the families, you get them in kinship and you think that these family members are supposed to be your blood and they have love for you and you think it's the right thing, and then they actually are trying to steal your children from you and adopt them out? I mean, how often does this happen, and what can you do about these things?
You know, it's hard because her case has gone so far already. You know, a lot of time has passed. She's going to have to focus her energies on this young child right now, try to get that child back. I do want to tell you, Virginia, this has been several months ago. We had a woman on that after 5 years of losing her parental rights, her rights were terminated. The child was adopted. She kept fighting and eventually got her child back and got her rights reinstated. So,
oh, wow.
she was on one of our shows, and it was one of those things where, you know, she never gave up. Now, granted, the stars had to align just right, you know, but yeah, she got her daughter back after 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So there's always hope.
See, and that's why I keep going forward.
Yeah, you have to. That's your children. You know, that's your child. That's nobody else's. It will never be anybody else's. You know, there's always something that's going to come up. There's getting this war for us, you know, every day, you know, like his day is entrenched in fighting these people. And as long as there's people like him, there is hope, you know, like, and, you know, you just got to stay positive. Don't let yourself get down. Don't believe what everybody's telling you. Don't let people talk you down. See, I used to be one of those people that if you said CPS, you told me CPS was in your life, I'd be like, I don't want anything to do with you. You must be a horrible person. And time is showing that that's not true, so you keep your head up, like don't let people put you down, like, because you know what, you made a mistake, or you didn't even make a mistake. You just fell on some bad issues of life life happens to people, just point blank, life happens.
Yeah.
And I heard a judge say the other day,
Yeah.
he was questioning the man on the stand. He was like, how long do you think is life happening for these people? Does it seem like life is going to continue to happen like this? Or was this an isolated incident? And these are things that, if your attorney's not, these are things that make your attorney ask these people, let them notice this. If that's your children, don't interfere in the attorney's way of going about things, but make sure you ask them questions. That way that what's the answers to what their questions are. Your attorney will have a strategy for you. Let them, that's their fight. They know how to fight for you, but make sure that, if you have a question, ask, because that's your kids at the end of the day. Make sure you ask and that that's just it. People forget that too. Just because you need to be on top of this, because if you're going to keep fighting, you need to know what's happened from now to then, that's just important. So, definitely do for that. So you're close on your child though, right? The youngest child, like where you're getting the overnights. What are the next steps for there?
Well, I spoke with my attorney, and they're going to push for overnights and to get more visits and stuff, because I've done everything, and I've always been at 4-hour visits, for all this time. And I'm like, well, where's the next move from their part? Where's the steps going forward? It's always been steps back on their part. I've always gone forward, and it's like they need to go forward too. They need to take some action, some steps for the work that I've done, because they make it seem like it's nothing. When this caseworker told me she didn't even read the notes of the counselor that I was with for over 2 years, that's hard work. That is my time and my effort. And for her to say, oh, I couldn't find the time, or I cannot say why I couldn't find the time, it's just, it just makes you feel like, what the heck?
Right. To spit in your face.
I do have a question though. Yeah. I have a question. With the petition for review, what are they looking for in it specifically? Or do they always view them, or is it something that, what brings out a certain point in it?
Well, they're looking for mistakes of law or an abuse of discretion in finding of certain facts that you contest. The chance, though, and I'm just telling you about California, that the Supreme Court takes on a case for a petition or review is very slim. I think it's less than 5%, maybe even less than 3%. So it's very difficult, because constitutionally speaking, you've had your right to one appeal already, the Court of Appeals, and apparently you didn't prevail there. And in order for the Supreme Court, at least here in California, to take that case on, there has to be some very important legal issue that they're going to clarify for everyone in the state. So I assume there are things like that are happening, or they just find, total miscarriage of justice that they feel that they have to address. So if you have filed a petition for review to the Arizona Supreme Court, and you feel strongly about that you have been wronged, you should start now considering filing a writ to the United States Supreme Court. And the chance of taking a look at this gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But, it's like one of those things that I just told you about that guest we had on several months ago. Bless you. Never say die.
Thank you. That was, so I can take it to the United States Supreme Court.
You can. That doesn't mean they're going to look at it or listen to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or
just
okay.
But don't let that keep you down, though. You just, there's still, like you said, there's a minute amount. So if you keep fighting for that child, call Mr. Davis's office, and I'm sure that he'd be glad to speak at you about something, maybe whatever, if you run into something or whatever, use your resources. Definitely use your resources in this. You're starting a war against people that have been engulfed in this system for a lot of years. As much as you feel like it's right because your kids were this, you don't know the law like a lawyer knows the law. That's the problem that I had with this whole thing.
Yeah.
And Mr. Davis tried to drill it into my head all the time. Like, you don't know, you don't play ball with these people. What I see might be wrong, and wrong isn't wrong or wrong, so make sure you use your resources, and whether you have an attorney that you talk to, whether you could call Mr. Davis to ask him a question. I mean, any of those things, make sure you do that because they are your kids and they deserve your best shot. That's
yes. And I'm going to continue to do everything I can do to do so. I've been trying to do everything I can do because I feel like if I don't do everything I can do, I just won't feel, these are my children, how can you not do everything you can do? It's hard, and they make you feel like, oh, well, even if you do things that they ask, oh, it's not good enough, or you're not good enough to have your kids. That's how they make me feel. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm tired of it because, I've made mistakes in my past, but I'm here to, get my kids back, and I'm here to go forward with life. And they have me dwelling in the past on a situation, that is from years ago. And they're just like, well, remember this time, remember this. Well, you know what? I've changed, I've gone, it's not enough to have me and my kids a life sentence, It's just, they're like, they make something so little into so big, you know what I mean? But everything they've done is just, oh, you can't even look their way. They sweep it under the rug, you don't even say anything about them. It's hard to, because then you get a new caseworker and then a new supervisor. And then what do you do from there? You got to start all over again. And that's what's been happening here.
Mr. Davis, what are the rules for caseworkers switching in and out of cases? Is there any guidelines that are gone by or are supposed to be like rules or policies or anything to either prevent a caseworker from being biased, or, are they supposed to change out every so often, or is there just kind of like as their leisure, they do that?
I think it's a mix of things. It's hard to determine or to prove that someone's biased when they're saying they're not, and you're saying that they are. But that's up for the judge to decide.
Right.
Once in a while, I'll see a judge rule in favor of maybe the social worker overstepped or bias, but it's not the norm. Most judges, for whatever reason, find that the social worker is not biased.
But what I'm saying is do they keep us like for a social worker? I know in Maine, for instance, after every procedure, like after you go to a Jeopardy hearing, they're supposed to change your social worker to be to a new social worker. Is there a norm of any of that stuff? Or is that just like the policy that each state implements and how their services go? Or, do you see a lot of social workers go through one case, or is there one that stays through? Like, how does that?
Oh, no, it varies, especially in California. People are coming and going because of, job promotion, new jobs, being laid off, that type of thing. So there's always, social workers being changed. A lot of people think social workers are changed because, of that particular case, maybe being too nice to parents, maybe being too mean to parents. And I have heard of that happening. But the norm is usually people are moving on. They're transferring departments, transferring divisions within CPS. There's a lot of reasons why workers are changed. Unfortunately, there's no law that, there be a certain type of continuity. And unfortunately, when people move around, things like what happened to Virginia in her case happen. You keep getting people telling her to do different and new things, and she can, and they're unfairly making her do things, and she's just using it against her to keep the children away from her.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that they've asked you to do, Virginia, that you say like you said, there's corruption and all of these things? What are some of the instances that's happened in your case that you were unjust?
Well, an instance is they have asked me to show them numerous times on co-parenting with the dad. And I have it written down in papers from TDMs. It was a specific caseworker. She's like, I need to see what co-parenting with the kiddos is going to look like between you and dad. You guys be at like meet up at a neutral place for drop-offs. And I showed her that me and dad can co-parent, and then they use that against me too, saying, oh, well, she's seeing dad, and they just like flipped it around and turned it and used it against me. And I'm like, whoa, you guys said to do this. In my counselor's notes, numerous times we talked about co-parenting because that's what they wanted to see. We have children. Realistically, how do you not see each other? You know what I mean? If you have kids together, they, instead of them saying, we want to see how you guys are working things out for the children's sake, they say that, and then another caseworker comes in and they don't relay the information to the next person, and then they use that against you as they told me I'm minimizing my domestic violence.
Right.
Well, that's when your attorney and you can have a contest or a trial and bring your counselor to court and have that counselor testify that you aren't minimizing. One of the things that I always see is that social workers.
Yeah, that's what we did.
That social workers always give opinions that they shouldn't be given, and your attorney or the attorney for the parent doesn't object to it. I'm doing a case right now where the judge told me, you've made it clear that the social worker is not qualified to give an opinion about mental health or about emotional health because she's not licensed. And I think the judge has accepted that. Social workers say things all the time. I remember there's kind of a famous case where an attorney won a large award against DCFS because at the CPS case level, the social workers were opining that the mother had suffered from a mental health disease called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. But the fact was, they're not qualified to give that opinion. And, apparently, I'm not sure, but at the trial court level, the CPS court level, the judge accepted that testimony from the social worker that the mother was suffering from Munchausen by proxy, Munchausen syndrome by proxy. But then when they got sued, the jury found that, hey, Miss Social Worker, you don't have the experience to diagnose a mental health disease. Munchausen syndrome by proxy used to be, and I don't know if it still is, in the DSM, the mental health disorders. There's a book that lists all the mental health disorders that human beings can have. And interestingly enough, from edition to edition, it changes. I know one time Munchausen syndrome was always in the DSM, and then I think it went out, and then it came back in, and I think it went out. I don't even know if it's in there now, but people talk about it quite a bit, and it's almost as if it's an accepted mental disorder or emotional disorder. But here's the problem. The social worker can't testify to that. And if you or your attorney don't object to it, it gets to come into evidence and the judge can consider it. It'd be like me telling you, hey, Virginia, you need open heart surgery. Well, I'm not a medical doctor. And worse than that, I've never seen your medical chart or any of your medical tests. But what if I went into court and I said that? Your attorney has to say objection. Davis is not a medical doctor. He has no experience to say anything like that. The evidence that comes into court is supposed to be controlled, and it's supposed to meet certain standards. It's not common sense, or it's not me giving you my lay opinion about something. Okay. And I've told people this before. One of the most important things in a CPS case, in any case for that matter, is keeping out evidence that's not relevant or without a foundation, or, that's hearsay, or getting in your evidence. That's one of the tricks, so to speak, of being a good trial lawyer, keeping out evidence against you and bringing in evidence for you. Okay?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Do you have any questions for me, Virginia?
My question was, how common is it that they do sever rights and then they do return one of the children?
How common? Is that what you said?
Yes. Is that something that they do?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know whether to call it common or not common, but it's something that's definitely possible. if the child has been placed out of your care at what they call in California the dispositional hearing, they're supposed to order family reunification services for you. And if you successfully complete those reunification services to you, the child is supposed to be returned to you. Now, the problem is, and I'm not saying this is your problem, the parent doesn't complete the reunification services, or they do, and the social workers are opining, well, they didn't get anything out of that. How can a social worker tell you or tell the judge
That's what they did to me.
Okay, but see, are you objecting to it at the time of trial? Social worker says, well,
the caseworker said that since, yes, she went on the stand and said that I was doing years of domestic violence counseling, but she thinks that I don't know anything of domestic violence because I went to church with the dad, that we attended the same church, but they don't know the same service, same days. And she said that I was at square one, but yet she never read any of the notes from the domestic violence counseling. And
okay, but stop.
They told me never that.
Did your attorney object to that testimony as being speculation and without foundation?
My attorney had said, how can she say anything without her even reading the notes of
so
what I learned and what I didn't learn?
Darren,
I'm sorry. I don't remember. I have the record, but
Darren, here's an important point I want to make. I asked her a question, and like a social worker, she didn't answer my question.
Right. It was yes or no.
No, I said.
Well, yeah, my attorney did object to it. Yeah.
Okay. And what did he say? Objection what?
I remember my attorney was saying that she couldn't have a stand say on what I knew and what I didn't know of domestic violence because she didn't read the domestic violence notes.
Okay,
that's what I remember from the trial.
Okay, that's not what I'm mentioning. I said, does she even have the qualifications? Assuming she read the notes, does she have the qualifications to give us a professional opinion about mental or emotional health?
No.
Then why didn't we object based upon foundation and its speculation? Who cares if she read the notes? That's not the point. I mean, it is a point, kind of a sub point, but the bigger point is, how can she even have that opinion? She might as well tell us what it takes to get a rocket to the moon. She's not trained in that either. Are we going to listen to what she says? Because that's basically what we're doing when she starts telling about your mental health and your domestic violence. And here's the other thing. Did you bring in your domestic violence counselor to say, oh, Miss Social Worker is wrong? Virginia knows everything about domestic violence. She's learned so much in the last X years. She's gone to courses with me. Go ahead.
He didn't point out that the social worker was wrong because at the time of the trial, he was on the second day of the trial, and I believe her going on stand was the third day. But he just said that I knew everything and I attended every session with him for over 2 years, and that he was trying to reach out to the caseworker to see what more that I needed to work on, and she never bothered to communicate with him, even though he tried to reach out numerous times. But he didn't say like, oh, the caseworker, because her testimony was after his.
Hold on. Here's the key question. Darren, watch this.
Yes, sir.
Is Virginia a risk to the children because of domestic violence? And if your worker said, and if your counselor says no, that's the end of the story. He's the licensed professional, not the social worker.
Yeah, he said all that. He said all that stuff. He said it. My parent aide said it. My parental class, even the domestic violence counselor who had degrees in all that.
Parent aide? What's a parent aide going to say about domestic violence?
Well, she didn't say domestic violence. She said if I'm okay to parent my children. She said that there was no concerns because I would have visits at home. There was no incidents. There was no anything. But the counselor did say that, I met all my goals in domestic violence, and that I had all the tools necessary for my kids to reunify home. That I knew domestic violence triggers. I knew red flags. He laid out a whole thing of what we talked about.
Did the judge rule against you, and did you appeal that decision?
The judge ruled against me because his ruling, he said that he wasn't comfortable with me going to a church where there was only a few members and where dad used to go. That's what I have it in the ruling. He said that's what his thing was against me, saying, well, and then he asked the counselor, said, does it matter how many people go to this church? Do you feel comfortable? And the counselor said, no, it doesn't matter how many people go to the church because it's a safe environment. And they still sever my rights. And that's what the judge used against me, is because I was going to church where there was only a few members of where the dad was previously baptized. There was no concrete evidence of dad and me going together. There was no concrete evidence of what services, but that is why he terminated my rights, he said, in the ruling.
And did you appeal that?
I did.
Did you win or lose?
I lost my appeal. So that's why I'm doing the petition for review.
Okay, in my humble opinion, not knowing anything about Arizona law, if you were in California, I think you would win on appeal if that was the judge's only reason. Especially after the testimony of your domestic violence counselor.
So take that little square and just think about that.
Yep, I have all my records. I have everything.
Don't just think about what Mr. Davis said to you and let that soak into your head a little bit. You don't want to write a story. Just stick to the point.
Hey, Virginia, we're past our time. Do you have one last question?
Okay, I just want to say thank you for having me on. And, if I have anything else I want to ask, I will give you a call because I have lots of questions. Trust me, I would be on here all night asking questions because I have tons of them, going through this and not knowing a lot of stuff, but things that I have learned along the way, from the experience. So I've been trying to learn the law part of it. And apparently, sometimes things are unfair in situations, but I'm not going to give up, on trying. So that's why I took the facts out of my record and I took it to the Supreme Court, because I would think that if the counselor said I did everything I got to do, that the judge would say, okay, well, what's the problem?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? Because of your experience and because you've actually, I think, done a lot of research, would you be interested in being a state representative for us for Arizona and perhaps even a host? What we're doing is we're starting shows by state.
Yeah.
So we have, for example,
okay,
one of the newer shows that we have is Fight CPS New York Edition. How would you like to be the host of Fight CPS?
Yes.
Arizona.
Yes, decision.
Yes. Oh, I'd love to. Yes.
All right. So do you have Grace's email address? She's the producer that sets you up.
I don't know if I have her email, but I do have her. Yes, I actually do have her email. Yes.
It's basically grace@vincentwdavis.com. That's her email address. Okay. I want you to email her after the show.
Yes, I think
your information.
Okay.
And we'll get you going on this. Okay. Hey, Virginia,
Okay.
I want to thank you.
Yes.
I want to thank you for being on tonight and sharing your story with us. It's much appreciated. And we'll be talking to you and working with you in the very near future. All right.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you for having me on.
All right. Good night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mr. Darren.
All right, Mr. D. That was some good stuff right there. That was a woman. That's a hard woman. That's a hard-working woman right there.
Any questions you want to ask me for tonight before we sign off?
No, not anything in particular. I'm just kind of, you know what? No, I really don't. The domestic violence thing, I leery on. This is not for my situation or anything, but this is just in general. I know in some places, for instance, when they did the audit on the state of Maine, they said that domestic violence isn't always a incident regarding as or to be founding of neglect or abuse. They said that isolated incidents of domestic violence without the child around is not to be considered for neglect or abuse. Are you finding that, or like, what are you finding in the game of domestic violence? How that's playing into these TPRs? Because it feels to me it's like drugs and domestic violence are the two hammerheads that they're sending home for TPRs. And I know that they're grouping those because they're easy. So what say you?
I say that they use them because they're easy.
Mm-hmm.
Easy. How can a social worker tell me or tell the court their feelings about whether my client got anything out of domestic violence?
Right.
I'm in the middle of a trial right now, and I asked the worker. She of course said my client didn't internalize anything. And by the way, do you have any license here in California?
Right.
No. Okay. Whatever. So,
Right.
and I said, by the way, you never spoke to my client's domestic violence counselor, did you? No, I didn't. So how do you know she never got anything out of the domestic violence that would keep her, make her safe and taking care of her own children? Well, I
Mm-hmm.
just feel that way. Really? What do you base those feelings on? Because you rarely spoke to my client.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
so, like, where did this all develop from?
Right, because I've talked to people that they've gotten police reports, which there are no police reports because there's been no domestic violence. They took, for instance, because they said that they saw their husband grab a phone from, yes, Colette, I am close to Massachusetts, and Ariel, thank you very much. But, they said that they took the phone out of their wife's hand and that was, a reason for them to be concerned of domestic violence, when in all actuality, the wife threw the phone because she was sick of talking to the caseworker. But that they brought that to court and with no evidence, with no anything other than the caseworker saying what she thought she saw, they were used to, and that was it. And like, that's just getting to be ridiculous. So what do
And
you think?
here's what the other problem that that I see a lot. Domestic violence is all the same thing. And in my mind, domestic violence, it's all relative. In other words, there's domestic violence that's a 1, there's domestic violence that's a 5, a 7, an 8, and a 10. And I think it's a mistake in judging these people that domestic violence is all the same.
Right.
I'm going to tell you something, because I was doing this prior to, during, and after the O.J. Simpson trial. Are you too young or old enough to?
No, listen. We stood around the TV and we're waiting for that not guilty coming in. So I remember those days very well.
Okay, so after that decision, our society went on a domestic violence craze. And I'm not saying that domestic violence is a good thing, because it's not. But what I'm saying is it's not as bad as what people portray it to be in
Correct.
every situation.
Because an argument will be domestic violence in some terms.
I've seen cases over the years, over the decades, where people have lost their kids because of one domestic violence incident. One.
Right.
Now, I think back in my family, were there ever domestic violence incidents? Yeah, there were.
Right. Thanksgiving is a dangerous time of year sometimes. You got
Right.
knives and forks and hot things.
So, and this is what happens. I remember this one case where the parents didn't get the kid back because after the domestic violence, there was an order that they not see each other, and they couldn't stop seeing each other because I guess they were in love. But since that initial domestic violence incident, up until when they lost their parental rights, according to my client, one of the parents, there was never any other domestic violence incident. but they got pigeonholed as being,
Right.
bad perpetrators, bad
Correct.
victim. And, I've had social workers tell clients, the only way you're going to get your child back is if you leave him.
Yeah.
Now, I've always found that odd because they call it family reunification,
Right. Well,
but then they say you're not going to get your child back unless you leave him.
think
Wait
about
a minute. Wait a
Mr.
minute. That might be illegal,
Right.
but it seems to me, and I'm just observing from everyone in the court system, that nobody's really blown away by that.
No, it's called the Division of Family Services. Just think about that. Division of
Yeah.
Family Services.
Like everything else in the world, there can be improvement in this
Right.
particular system that we're in. And I hope by having these types of shows that you and other people like you can come and share and expose what's really going on.
Right. Well, I mean, life happens to people.
Mhm.
We all, you could come out of here right now, someone hit your car, and you could have a flip out of all flip outs just because your stress blows through the roof. That doesn't
Right.
mean that you're a bad person. That doesn't mean that you're a violent man. That doesn't mean any of that. And then for them to take that one little isolated incident and then blow it up into you can't be a lawyer anymore, or like just go on and on and on about these things. Life happens to people. And it seems to me with something so precious as children, to give them a death penalty over isolated incidences, which aren't even, I'm not, all right. So if a husband beats the living hell out of a woman and puts her close to death, yeah, I'm on about that stuff. But if a couple's in an argument and maybe the wife slaps the man across the face and it was one time, I'm sorry, because the things got heated, you're right. Those are absolutely different. Do they deserve the death penalty for that? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And nor do their children.
And we do the same thing with drug abuse.
Right. Absolutely.
And I get the feeling many times that, drug use of an illegal drug is like the death penalty for the parent.
Of
And the
course.
law actually is that you've used the illegal drug and it caused you to not take care of the child or makes you a risk at taking care of the child going forward. Now, in the literature, there's something called a functional drug addict.
Correct.
You know what that is? That's a person who's taking care of their kid top notch, even though they have an addiction to an illegal drug.
Correct.
But when we say drug addict or using drugs, we think about that person laying out in the gutter.
Yeah, needle hanging out of their necks.
Right.
Everything.
And that's not every drug addict.
Right.
That's not every drug addict. But we ball them all together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm involved in a case, and a positive drug test is a scientific piece of evidence. And in order to get a scientific piece of evidence into evidence in California, you have to prove something. It's called the Kelly-Fry test. Okay? And I bring it up occasionally because my client will tell me that your chain of custody was broken. For example, he'll piss in a cup and he just leaves it in the bathroom in a place with a whole bunch of other cups, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's nobody there guarding it.
Right.
And not too long ago, I objected on a drug test result coming into evidence, and I said, objection, Kelly-Fry, blah, blah, blah. The judicial officer looked at me like I was the man from Mars. Here's Miss G. She's calling me.
I'm surprised my phone's not doing that either. To be honest.
Anyway, let me turn off the ringer. I wonder why she would call me during the middle of the show.
I don't know. When there was 3, take away 1. Now there's 2. I don't know.
Right.
I'm kidding, Miss G.
I
love you very much.
Anyway, we've come to the end of the show. We're way past the time. I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank you, Darren, for being a co-host tonight.
Yes,
I want to thank Miss G for being a co-host for about the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, she was great.
We miss her.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll be back on the show tomorrow night at 7 p.m.
All right.
We'll see everybody then. Good night.
Till we meet again, be safe, everyone.